So we're going to talk about emotional processing, about how energy actually moves between people, and about why some of us end up carrying far more than we signed up for. Let's start with something that probably sounds familiar. You've had the experience of feeling drained, genuinely exhausted after being around someone, and you can't point to anything specific. There was no conflict, no crisis, they didn't say anything upsetting, and yet you feel like you need, I don't know, an hour, 2 hours alone just to come back to yourself. Maybe you blamed yourself for this. Maybe you've told yourself you're too sensitive or too introverted or too something. Or maybe you've tried to figure out what's wrong with the other person. Are they toxic? Are they draining on purpose? Sometimes people say vampire, energetic vampire. But here's what I want to suggest. Neither of those framings, I think, is quite right. What is actually happening is more subtle and more important than either of those explanations. It has to do with something most of us were never taught to see: the difference between people who process their emotions inside themselves and people who process their emotions through the environment. And that environment includes you, especially if you're empathetic and sensitive. The idea I want to hold on to: every human being has emotional experiences. We feel anxiety, sadness, frustration, excitement, fear, you name it. What varies enormously from person to person is how those emotions get processed. Some people process emotions internally. They feel what they feel and they stay with it. They don't need to immediately do something with it. They can hold their own discomfort without automatically exporting it. And some people process emotions externally. When something builds up inside them, they need to release it. That release happens through the environment, through talking, tension, through the people nearby. Now, and this is important, that external processing is not a character flaw. It's often a pattern that developed for understandable reasons, usually in early life when someone had no other choice. But of course, later on, it does create a very specific dynamic in relationships, especially for people who are sensitive, attuned, empathetic, and I think it's you. Because when someone who processes externally is near someone who can hold emotional space, the emotion finds a container. And that container might be you. Let's talk about what it feels like to be with someone who processes internally, because I think it's worth naming explicitly. When you are with someone who can hold their emotional experience, something interesting happens. You can simply be present. You're not scanning for what they need. You're not managing the atmosphere in the room. You're not holding anything for them. There's a kind of stillness, even in a conversation, laughter, even in deep discussion of something difficult. These are people who can feel anxious without making you responsible for their anxiety. They can be said without requiring you to fix it. And they can sit with uncertainty in themselves without leaking it onto you. When you live in interaction like that, you might feel neutral, just yourself again. Energized, maybe, even if the topic was interesting for you. You feel connected, you're not depleted. And here's something worth noticing: the absence of drain is itself information. When you walk away and feel like yourself, that's telling you something about what that relationship asks of you. Being with someone should not cost you yourself. Now let's talk about the other side. And I want to do this carefully because it's easy, to turn this into a villain narrative. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to villainize anyone. But those people who process externally, they can be actually nice, soft spoken, and they can be people you love. They can be people who love you very much. What they have in common is something about their relationship to their own internal experience. For various reasons, often developmental, often tied to early experiences of not being taught to tolerate discomfort, they never learn to stay with their own emotional activation. So when something builds inside them, anxiety, unspoken resentment, or sadness, their nervous system looks for relief. And that relief often happens through talking, not to process, but to discharge, through seeking reassurance, through creating tension that you feel obligated to resolve. And they need you to track them, kinda. So notice the tone. None of them are dramatic. And yet, in every case, something is being exported from them and received, often without your conscious awareness, into you. This is what we might call emotional discharge, and it's very common. Most of the time, the person doing it has no idea it's happening. They're not draining you on purpose most of the time, but their nervous system is using yours to complete that regulation cycle that they cannot complete on their own. Once you see that mechanism, you can't unsee it. I want to introduce a term that I think captures this phenomenon better than most of the language we currently have, and I call it emotional hosting. Emotional hosting is when your nervous system becomes the processing environment for someone else's unresolved emotional material. The word hosting is deliberate here because a host takes something in, creates space for it, manages it, often at their own expense. When you are emotionally hosting someone, you might not even be aware of it. The process is invisible, but your body registers it. So here's what makes this emotion especially complicated for certain people. If you grew up in a family system where emotional attunement was survival, where reading the room was how you stayed safe, where knowing what others felt before they expressed it was a necessary skill, then you're probably a very skilled host. Your nervous system is calibrated to absorb, to accommodate, and to make room for other people's emotions. And in many contexts, it's a gift. It makes you a good therapist, friend, parent, good partner. And it also means that around the people who are processing externally, you're very vulnerable because it's hard for you to filter. The problem is not that you're too open. The problem is that no one taught you the difference between empathy and absorption. Empathy means you can feel with someone. Absorption means their feeling becomes yours, and you lose track of where you end and where they begin. Your body keeps score of emotional hosting often before your mind catches up. So let me give you the signs that hosting might be happening. You feel like that sudden unexplained fatigue that wasn't there before the interaction. You feel that heaviness in your chest or shoulders, that physical sensation of carrying something. A low grade anxiety, maybe, that you can't attach to anything specific in your own life. Or you feel that needing to fix something, even though nothing was asked of you. Irritability, maybe, after certain interactions, not anger them exactly, but anger towards that weight you're holding because you didn't ask for it. Also, you might notice that you think about them a lot when you're not together. And if you're still holding something for them, you will be thinking about them. So if that resonates, I want to offer you something that I think is very important. All that means that you're responsive. Your system does exactly what it was designed to do. The question is whether you want to keep doing it unconsciously or whether you want to make a choice. Now, why are empathetic people more susceptible? Partially, it's neurology. People higher in trait empathy show stronger neuron activation. They literally feel more of what others feel physiologically. There's also psychology, the psychology of early relational learning. If you grew up around someone who was emotionally dysregulated, someone who needed you to manage their internal world, you didn't just learn to read emotions. You learned that other people's emotional states were your responsibility. And that beliefs run silently in the background. It turns you into an automatic host for people whose system needs regulation. I want to offer you a reframe, and it's a shift in how you understand this whole dynamic. The question is not why are some people so draining? That question keeps you passive. It puts the problem entirely in the other person, and it leaves you with no real agency except avoiding these people. The more powerful question is, when am I unconsciously choosing to take on what isn't mine? Notice the word choosing. I use it because what we're talking about is not fully conscious. Your nervous system does it automatically, most likely based on that old learning, old patterns, old roles that you played. So you've played them so long that they became invisible. Once you can see the pattern, it stops being fully automatic. And there's a moment where choice becomes available. You can be empathetic without being a container. Those are not the same thing. You can feel what someone is feeling genuinely and still not absorb it into your body and You don't have to carry it home with you. You can be present and not merge. You can witness without hosting their emotions. The distinction between empathy and emotional hosting is one of the most important things we, I think, must learn, because we often confuse depth of care with depth of self sacrifice, and they're not the same. I want to give you something that you can actually use. It's one question. The next time you leave an interaction in feeling drained, before you start analyzing the other person, pause and ask yourself this: what was I feeling before this interaction began? That's it. That's the question. Because one of the clearest signs that emotional hosting has happened is that you cannot answer that question. You try to access your pre interaction emotional state and you can find it, it's gone because it's replaced by whatever you picked up. When you can answer the question, when you can say, I was feeling calm or curious or tired, um, that's your baseline. That's you. Everything that doesn't match that baseline after the interaction is worth paying attention to. And over time, you can build on this. Before certain interactions, take just 10 seconds to notice your current state. Name it silently or write it down. After the interaction, notice what's different. Just observation. Ask yourself, is this feeling mine? Did I bring it here or did I collect it? If it's not yours, you don't have to process it. You can set it down. Setting it down can be a physical act, even a walk, taking a breath, changing environment, grounding yourself, something that signals to your nervous system that's not mine to carry. And you're not abandoning the person you were with. You're simply declining to host their emotional material. You do not consent to that. So being empathetic is not a liability. The ability to feel others, to really feel them, is one of the most extraordinary things a human being can do. But empathy was never meant to mean self erasure. You do not need to absorb to disappear. And people are dropping emotions on you automatically. And your compassion for that can remain. What can change is that unconscious belief that it's your job to provide that, emotional hosting. You can be a deeply feeling person who also has a self. And those things are not in conflict. If that resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you how you're protecting your nervous system, because this is exactly what this channel is about. Take good care of yourself. See you soon.